I've always been a big screen iMac kind of guy, but the 24-inch M1 iMac has completely changed my mind. Hello and welcome back to Mark Ellis Reviews, and thank you for subscribing if you have. If you haven't, the button is, you know where it is, it's down there somewhere. So if I hadn't bought the 24-inch M1 iMac to review for you guys, for my audience, I probably wouldn't have bought it. And the reason for that is simple. I always go for big screen things. It struck me the other day that I seem to be, as I'm getting older, I seem to be buying smaller screened tech. So for example, I've gone from having the big Plus or Max sized iPhones to the regular iPhone 12 Pro. And also, even though the 12.9 iPad Pro is now my photo editing thing of choice, I actually use the iPad Air, which is the 11-inch, the smaller screen version, more often than not. And now I've had this 24-inch M1 iMac on my desk for a few weeks, I'm amazed by how much I'm enjoying the smaller screen. And it's not that small, it's 24 inches, it's bigger than the 21.5-inch old Intel iMac that it replaces. So it's not a small screen at all, really. Okay, if you compare it to the great big 34-inch widescreen behind me, it's not as big as that or as wide as that, but it's still quite a good size. The problem is that a lot of people will view this iMac as the small version, even though the big M-based version iMac isn't here yet, and we don't know when it's going to arrive. So if you're on the fence about this 24-inch iMac at the moment, based almost solely on the screen size, I've got 5 reasons it might be for you. Now, the reason that 34-inch widescreen monitor is still behind me and connected to the M1 Mac Mini is because I use it now completely for video editing and audio editing as well. And that is where these big screens like that one and the 27-inch iMac really come into their own. If you are a video editor, audio editor, or you perhaps work with a lot of code, it's nice to see as much of your work on the screen as possible. So for me, that means getting the entire timeline, as it's known, for the entire video on one screen, or seeing as much of it as I can while I'm editing. It's just genuinely useful. The problem comes when you step outside of those apps, and you just start using your normal everyday apps. And with all that screen real estate, what you do, what I certainly found myself doing, was just using it because I could. So I'd perhaps put my writing app Ulysses on the left-hand side, Safari for research in the middle, then might have Trello or some other form of project management app on the right-hand side. I might go further than that. I might perhaps split the very furthest app on the right-hand side and have another app beneath it, so you've technically got 4 apps in front of you. Brilliant, you feel like you're working at NASA. It's also massively unproductive, or it was for me anyway, because I spent more time rearranging the screen and marveling at how many things I could look at once, rather than actually getting stuff done. So for me, that big 34-inch widescreen is great for certain types of creative work, but for most other work that I do, the size of this 24-inch iMac screen is ideal. And that's mainly because you can only pretty much get 2 apps on there side by side, and that's enough. So for me personally, if I'm writing something, I'll just have Ulysses on one side, which is my writing app, on the right-hand side, Safari for research. Easy, there's no more distractions, it's just those 2 apps, done. So you can get addicted to big screens and just using that screen real estate for the sake of it. So if the type of work that you do would need maximum 2 apps open side by side at the same time, the 24-inch iMac is the perfect sweet spot for that. Now, I recently installed a brilliant standing desk from a company called FlexiSpot. I'll link above to the video where I unbox it and show you what it all looks like and how to set it up. But it's smaller than the desk that it replaces. So before this one, I had a great big IKEA thing that sat on trestles. Lovely desk actually, but just too big for this fairly small studio. So once this FlexiSpot desk was in place, I had to get a bit more creative about how I use the desk space, because I'm the sort of person, I don't like clutter. You'd laugh if you saw the mess around here at the moment, out of shot. But generally speaking, on my desk, I like to keep it as clean as possible. And when I switched to the FlexiSpot desk, that 34-inch widescreen monitor was just a bit too big for it. It just took up too much space. It felt a bit too overbearing. Now the 24-inch iMac has completely changed that. It's got such a small footprint, it's ridiculously thin. I talked a lot about this in my review, which again I'll leave a link to above. Apple wants this computer to disappear in front of you and just leave you with that beautiful 4.5K Retina screen. And it does that brilliantly. So if you're the sort of person like me who doesn't like clutter, then this 24-inch iMac is just a perfect size. For me, apart from just having a neater desk space, it does something for me when it comes to productivity. I get more stuff done if I'm in a fairly tidy environment. So if you're like that, if that really kind of sorts out your headspace and gets you in that really productive form of work, then yeah, 24-inch iMac. iMacs are a great value. I've said this several times. I think you struggle to find, if you bought all the separate bits, if you bought a Mac Mini, for example, and a separate keyboard, separate mouse, the problem comes when you get to the screen. Buying a screen that is as good as these Retina screens that you get in iMacs for the same money that you pay for the iMac over the Mac Mini, it's almost impossible. You pay a premium of about £600, $600 for that iMac screen, but boy is it worth it. But they're still not cheap computers. An iMac is a premium computer, let's be honest. And in the UK, the difference between the base level 24-inch iMac and the base level 27-inch iMac, I know we're not comparing apples for apples here, excuse the pun. Obviously the 24-inch M1 iMac is running a completely different chip to the 27-inch Intel iMac, but they're the two options we have at the moment. But the price difference between the two is £500 in the UK. That's a lot of money. And it's particularly a lot of money when you bear in mind how good the M1 chip is. In many cases, it will outperform the base level 27-inch iMac that runs the Intel chip. So even if you spend that extra £500, you are pretty much just getting a bigger screen, an older design, and let's be honest, probably a slower computer. So if you have got a bit of extra money to spend, I think it makes sense to forget about the screen size, go with the 24-inch iMac, add extra RAM, go up to the 16 gig version, add some extra storage if you need it, go for the version with more ports, go for the version that gives you more color choices if that's your thing. It only makes sense to buy a big screen computer if you can afford to have the computer you want inside it as well. With iMacs, I just don't think it is worth paying a premium for the size of the screen. And that's particularly the case at the moment when we're really not comparing iMacs for iMacs, but it is the choice we have. If you want a big screen iMac, you have to get the Intel version at the moment. But if I had that choice at the moment, I would absolutely go for this smaller 24-inch screen and just spend a bit more on beefing up the computer inside it. Now, as mentioned earlier, there are some apps that suit big screens perfectly. In my case, video editing, it just makes sense to have a bigger screen for that. And as mentioned earlier, bigger screens suit multitasking on the same screen. So if you're the sort of person who wants to have multiple apps on the same screen viewable at all times, then a big screen makes sense. However, if you're the sort of person who only works on one app at a time, so you only have one app open, then you don't need any more than 24 inches, trust me. One brilliant example of this is, again, Ulysses. It's the writing app that I use. It's fantastic for a stripped down writing experience. But if you have that for example, if I run that on that big 34-inch behind me or the 27-inch iMac downstairs, it looks a bit daft because you have the text in the middle and then this great big black expanse to the left and right, nothing there. Whereas on the 24-inch iMac, it looks brilliant. You just have a little border left and right and the text in the middle. It doesn't feel like you're wasting any of that screen space. Same thing with some websites. So generally speaking, web developers, web designers will design to common screen sizes, and a common screen size isn't really a 27-inch iMac. It's certainly not a 34-inch widescreen monitor. Most people obviously are using their phones to look at websites, but also most people have probably a 13-inch laptop or just a smaller screened desktop computer to be working from. And that's what most websites are designed to fit. And okay, they do very clever stuff with responsive design, the way that websites kind of change the size of elements on the screen to fit the screen that they're on. But generally speaking, if you look at certain websites on a 27-inch iMac, they can look a bit odd. Again, everything might just be in the middle with loads of white space left and right, or on certain websites where they fill the screen width, things get stretched, it just looks a bit strange. You don't get that issue on the 24-inch iMac. So if you spend most of your time working on an absolute maximum of 2 apps at once on the screen, but you're normally working on one app, then this 24-inch iMac is perfect for that. Now, the last reason I think it's probably worth going for this smaller screen iMac is because it's the only one that you can get at the moment with the M1 chip. And I've waxed lyrical about the M1 chip ad nauseum in previous videos. I will link at the end of this video to my full review of the iMac, but it is the only one you can get. I think WWDC has just passed, and that was a big lesson for me. Leading up to that event, we were expecting things like a brand new 14-inch M1 MacBook Pro or M2 MacBook Pro, whatever it was going to be, potentially a replacement for the MacBook Air, and a few other things which, according to some of the biggest leakers out there, who are generally quite accurate with their rumours and their leaks, we were going to get some serious stuff in terms of hardware at WWDC. That never happened. And that was a big lesson for me, and it means that I can no longer sit here and give you any advice or guidance when it comes to when the next iMac might come onto the market. We also don't know how big the screen's going to be, so at the moment the big screen iMac is 27 inches. There have been rumours that the new one's going to be 30, 32, bigger, who knows. And then you've got to think, what is that going to do to the price of it? I'd imagine that iMac, the new big screen iMac, is going to be a pretty expensive machine. So if you've been watching my videos on the M1 Mac Mini that is still behind me, the M1 MacBook Air, the M1 MacBook Pro, and you've been thinking, oh, I want to get my hands on one of these M1 machines, but you want an iMac, you only have one choice, which is this 24-inch. And if it's just the screen size that is keeping you back, I really would think about how I have adopted to this, because just like you, I would much rather go for the big iMac. But I love using this 24-inch screen. It's, again, apart from video editing, it is the screen I use pretty much all day. I think if you're a creative, if you do a lot of video editing, then it's probably a bit too small for you, to be completely honest, and you either wait for the next big iMac to arrive, or you get something like the M1 Mac Mini and attach a big ultra widescreen monitor like that one behind me to it. But if you're a business owner and you want a new iMac, or you've perhaps got a need for an iMac at home, if you've got an old, an aging 27-inch iMac at home, I would not think twice actually about switching to this 24-inch M1 iMac, even from that big 27-inch version. And this is again because of how good that M1 chip is. It will breeze through any regular computing task. You'll have no issues with that whatsoever. But the exciting thing is it's got so much latent power that, for example, if you have one of these 24-inch iMacs in your home and someone in the family decides to start trying out video editing or audio editing or perhaps a bit of programming, they can do it and it will just breeze through that as well. It just makes it a much more flexible machine, better resale value further down the line. You're getting so much more for your money. It's just, you just have to get your head around the fact that it's not the biggest screen potentially that's going to be available for the iMac. And just to kind of cap this off, so okay, I do use that monitor behind me purely for video editing, but when I then switch back to the 24-inch iMac to do the rest of my work, I don't miss that. I don't miss the 27-inch iMac either. So again, for someone who's always been a kind of big screen kind of bloke, sometimes smaller really is better. So if you've still got a few lingering questions about the 24-inch iMac, or you just want to get a bit more of an insight into how I feel about it, keep watching for a link to my full review. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll catch you in the next one.